Good morning, my dear students. I am Miss Rawan, and today we are going to continue with our lesson Horse Hears. Today's lesson is the 7th one. We are going to listen and analyze page 136 and 137. Then we're going to answer reading comprehension questions related to these pages. I hope all of you open with me page 136 and write the date at the top of the page. Let's listen first, then we're gonna answer together.
From Peru, Schifeli headed into Ecuador and followed a series of tracks through lush forests, over high mountains, and down into valleys. At night, Schifeli never tied up the horses. He knew they would not run. The three travelers were sharing a great adventure, each showing the others the way. Zigzagging up a narrow trail one day, Schifeli saw that the path ahead had been swept away by a landslide, leaving a sheer drop. There was no choice but to turn back and find another route. Schifeli tightened Gatto's packs to get ready for a long detour. But Mancha had other ideas. Schifeli saw with horror that Mancha was preparing to jump the gap. His heart rose in his mouth as Mancha sailed through the air and landed on the other side. The horse turned and neighed to his companions not to be afraid. Schifeli and Gatto soon followed. As their adventure stretched on, the three travelers reached the Panama Canal and crossed into Costa Rica and then Mexico.
Here on these two pages, my dears, we are going to continue the story of Schifeli and his two horses. He continues his journey from Peru, and he kept moving and riding the horses until he reached the Ecuador. Of course, he kept riding the horses, moving in forests and mountains and valleys. And he said that at night I never tied up the horses. What does tied up means? Tied up means he didn't rope the horses into a tree. Whenever he was going to sleep at night, he never tied them up. He never roped them into a tree. Why? Because he knew that the horses will never run away. They will never leave him alone. After that, he kept moving and riding with his horses, Mancha and Gatto, until he reached a zigzagging narrow trail. You all know what zigzag mean? Yes, as you can see here. And trail mean road. He kept moving, walking with the horses in this zigzagging narrow trail, means road. And when he was moving and walking on this trail, at the end of the road, at the end of it, he saw that the trail finishes there. How finishes? It was swept away by a landslide. It was destroyed by a landslide. Look here, guys. It was like that. Here at the end, it was destroyed by a landslide. Landslide means, as we all remember, thank you, rock slides down a steep. The end of the narrow zigzag line, it was destroyed by a landslide, and he thought that they couldn't move anymore. He couldn't move anymore. So, what did he do? He stopped there with the horses, with Mancha and Gatto, and Schifeli decided to get ready for another detour, for a long detour. Detour means another route. Detours mean another route. and route mean road or way, another way, okay? So Shifili, he tightened Gatto's back and he was about to go and walk in another long detour in another way because the end of the zigzag narrow line, it was destroyed by a landslide. While he was going to move with Gatto and Mancha, Mancha stopped, and Mancha, he had another idea. Look at Mancha. He had another ideas. Shifili looked at Mancha with horror, of course, and he said that my heart rose in my mouth. This phrase, it means that he got so scared. Shifili got so scared looking at Mancha when Mancha sailed through the air and landed on the other side. Sailed through the air, it means jumped into the other way. Mancha, he jumped and he landed on the other side. That was his idea. Of course, Shifili, when he saw that, he got so scared. He thought that something will happen to Mancha. And Mancha, he looked at them and he needed his companions. Who are his companions? Shifili and Gatto. He need to them. Need, it means the sound of the horse. The sound of the horse, as if he is telling them, follow me, jump as I did. Shifili and Gatto, of course, after that they followed him. They jumped as Mancha did. And of course they kept moving on their adventure until they reached Panama Canal. They reached Panama Canal and then they crossed it until they reached Costa Rica, and then they reached finally their destination, Mexico. They reached Mexico. Here, my sweetheart, for this page I am going to ask you 3 questions. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. The first question for the first paragraph: why didn't Shifili tie the horses at night? Why didn't Shifili tie the horses at night? Excellent, because he knew they would not run. Because he knew they would not run. The second question: what did happen to the narrow path? What did happen to the narrow path? Thank you. It was swept away by a landslide. It was swept away by a landslide. The third question: what did Mancha do? What did Mancha do? Excellent. Mancha sailed through the air and landed on the other side. Mancha sailed through the air and landed on the other side. I hope you all write these questions on a piece of paper with their answers and glue it on the top of the page. Now let's listen to page 137, then we're gonna analyze it paragraph by paragraph. All your fingers on the first line after you write the date at the top of the page. 1, 2, 3.
Moving through dense jungle, the trio had to cope with mosquito bites and attacks by vampire bats and poisonous snakes. Once Mancha slipped into a crocodile-infested river. He only just managed to find a foothold and pull himself up the bank as Shifili clung on for dear life. 2.5 years after setting out from Buenos Aires, Shifili reached Washington, D.C. He had achieved his lifelong ambition. I could never have done it, he said, without Mancha and Gatto. My 2 pals have shown powers of resistance to every hardship. Schifferle was given a hero's welcome, even meeting President Coolidge in the White House. Admirers suggested that the horses should live in a city park, but Schifferle took Mancha and Gatto back to Argentina and set them free.
Now, the trio, they kept moving until they reached the jungle. The trio, of course, are Schifferle, Mancha, and Gatto. When they reached the jungle, they needed or they had to cope with. Cope with means to go through. What did they have to go through? They had to go through to cope with mosquito bites and the attacks of the vampire bats, and also they saw poisonous snakes. They had to run away from all of these. Of course, you know that the jungle is full of animals, and of course most of them are dangerous. Also, when they were in the jungle, as you can see in the second paragraph, there was a river in the jungle. There was a river, and this river was infested with crocodiles. It was infested with crocodiles. You know, all infested means excellent, spread in great numbers. It means full of. This river was full of crocodile. While they were moving and saw this river they needed to walk, Mancha slipped and fell into the river. Mancha slipped and fell in this river that was full of and infested with crocodile. Of course, the crocodiles are dangerous animals and they could bite and eat Mancha. What did Mancha do? He kept looking for a place to put his foot in it. Of course, he managed to find a foothold. It means he wanted to find a place that he can put his foot in it and then pull himself back to the road. Of course, who helped to pull him up? Schifferle. Schifferle, he helped him to pull Mancha up to the road. After that, he said, we kept moving and I kept riding Mancha and Gatto for how much time? For 2.5 years. 2.5 years from Buenos Aires until I reached Washington, D.C. Finally, they reached Washington, D.C. after 2.5 years. Imagine that, my dears. It is a very long time. And finally he said, I have achieved my lifelong ambition. Of course, he did what he wanted to reach Washington, D.C. with his 2 horses. And he said, I could never have done it. I could never have done it without whom? Without Mancha and Gatto. Of course, without these strong, resourceful horses, he wouldn't reach Washington, D.C. He said, my 2 pals have shown powers of resistance. Pals mean friends. He said that these 2 horses are his pals, are his friends. They showed powers of resistance. Of course, resistance, we all strength against something. They showed the strength. They showed that they are very strong against all these difficulties, all this hardship. After that, of course, when he reached Washington, everyone was waiting for him and cheered him, listening to his story. Also, the president, Coolidge, of course, he welcomed him. Of course, the president at that time, he welcomed Schifferle and the horses. The people said at that time that the horses should live in a city park. They wanted to take these 2 horses and put them in a city park. Did Schifferle agree? No, he did not agree. He said, no, I'll take Mancha and Gatto back to Argentina. And of course, he took them back to Argentina and he set them free. He set them back free in the wild. Of course, my dears, Shifley, Mancha, and Gatto's story is real. It is real, as I have said before, and of course it was very dangerous way to walk and ride the horses all this way from Buenos Aires to Washington, D.C. Here, my dears, I have 3 questions for you. I hope you write with me and answer with me too. The first question: what did the trio have to go through? What did the trio have to go through? Excellent. They had to cope with mosquito bites and attacks by vampire bats and poisonous snakes. The second question: what was the river infested with? What was the river infested with? Excellent. It was infested with crocodiles. Crocodiles. The third question: how much time did it take to reach Washington? How much time did it take to reach Washington? Excellent. It took from them 2.5 years. 2.5 years. 2.5 years. Now I hope all of you write these questions on a piece of paper and glue it on the top. If you have any questions, you can always ask me and chat or call me on Teams. Thank you so much.